They're live.
Welcome in, friends. It is Betting Pros College Football Week 13 early line look ahead show. Try to say that more than once ever. If you could get that all in. Week 13. The final of the regular season is upon us. Are you kidding me? I just started up with these beautiful gentlemen. Who are they? It's Thor Nystrom, Eric Foton, Thor KU, CF Foton. My boys, we've been doing this all season long. We've been giving you the early look to take advantage of everything you possibly can. And what better way to do it this week than do it live? That's what we're doing. We are live on Betting Pros YouTube channel, which I think is a great way to approach this. And we'll be very curious to hear what all you have to say, because sometimes we talk about some of these lines and we say, all right, gentlemen, once you hear this, this may happen here, there, or there. Well, if you are checking it out live, you're getting instant reactions. Mr. Thor Nystrom, we talk about this a whole bunch. I've seen lines move already. We got a whole bunch to break down here. We got 8 big key games. We're going to be looking at the early lines. But how did that Week 12 treat you?
Very fun one. Yeah, we had the big games. Washington held on to remain undefeated over Oregon State. What was obviously a big game. And then you had ones that were lesser down on the radar. The fighting Jerry Kills in New Mexico State going and absolutely blast Auburn. Wasn't just on the scoreboard. They doubled them up in yardage and everything like that and took $1.8 million out the door for their paycheck game. So another interesting week. We have plenty of injuries to talk about today. The coach firings are already coming in. C'est la vie, Dino Babers. And we'll talk about all the ramifications on the spread with that news.
Man, Foton, 1.8 million for an L. It was quite the L. That was probably my favorite story. Those are always my favorite stories when everybody's not like, how cool is it that New Mexico won? They're like, can you believe that Auburn paid them $1.8 million and they lost? It was a pretty wild week we just had in 12 on Foton.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was actually at UNC at Clemson, a game where the referees played a outsized part of it. You know, there was a big interception on Cade Klubnik's part that was called back because of a questionable roughing the passer call. There were 3 fumbles within the 10-yard line, 2 for UNC, 1 for Clemson. So my first trip to Death Valley was a memorable one. Like, had a great time. Anybody who gets a chance to go and do some tailgating over at Clemson, it's not Clemson. I was corrected multiple times. It's Clemson. There's no Z in it, as they say down there in Clemson, South Carolina. So
I Z some words sometimes. So I would definitely Clemson all over the place.
Did it.
So yeah, Clemson. All right. Well, we got a lot for you. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, youtube.com/bettingpros. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of the action, and download the Betting Pros app. The Betting Pros app has got you covered with whatever you need. How are we pulling a lot of these early lines? bettingpros.com. Even better, it's not just one line or two. It's all the lines that are posted out on the books, and you can see the varying numbers because there are a lot of varying numbers that are out there. So download Betting Pros app today, iOS app, wherever it is, Android, iOS. You can sync your bets. You can follow your favorite people. You can set up customized alerts for some of the highest ROI returns, some of the best betting markets. You can have it for lines. It's the most robust betting app on the market. Betting Pros, download it today, because just because the college regular season is ending does not mean that your betting is ending. And we got you covered. Gentlemen, you ready to get into these bad boys? Let's talk about some Week 13. I still am a little bit crazy that we are here. And let's kick it off with Ole Miss and Mississippi State. Let's see. We've got a 12.5 early line. I think I've seen some varying degrees across a couple books here. Ole Miss 9-2 coming in at Mississippi State, who was only 5-6 and garbage in the SEC, 1-6. Kind of thought this line might be a little bit higher. And Thor, I don't want to set us off track here, but I do feel like there are a few sus lines out this week of like, why is this not bigger? But you tell me. Ole Miss minus 12.5, the total 56.5. What do you got on this one? And what does the Thor adjusted line tell us?
My line's actually Ole Miss minus 11.2. I think there might be some contrarian. I might have some contrarian interest in Mississippi State in this game. Egg Bowl's always played closer. Egg Bowl's always a crazy game. You know, I mean, that's why we look forward to Thanksgiving so we can watch that Egg Bowl game at night. You know, it's one of those throw out the record ones. And Mississippi State in the last game, they got back Will Rogers. They were able to play Southern Miss so they could sort of get through against an easy opponent. And they absolutely have something to play for beyond just their abject hatred for Ole Miss in this game. If Mississippi State wins this game, they rally into bowl season behind their interim coach. We talk about the dead cat bounce after you fire your head coach. College teams over the last 5 years, they're against the spread record, and the weeks after that are very, very good. I would lean towards Mississippi State with this early line. But I think that you anticipate the money's going to go on Ole Miss. I don't think this is one to bet right now because it's right under that key number of 13. I'm waiting on this thing because I expect the market to push this thing 13 and a half. You really cross your fingers for a 14. I doubt it gets there, but if I get a 13 and a half with Mississippi State, I'd be happy with that.
That's so interesting. And I completely forgot to mention that is the Thanksgiving Day game. We've got games scattered out during the entire week here. And unlike most weeks that we do this, we are going from Thanksgiving to Friday into Saturday with some of these games. But I don't know, Foton, do you feel any different? A 1-6 SEC team versus a 5-2 ranked? I don't know. It still seems odd to me. There are some key numbers, obviously, what the metrics are telling us, but do you feel any different, and what type of movement have we seen on this?
Yeah, this is one of the more interesting openers of this week. Reason being, Circa, the sharpest sports book in Las Vegas, opened this up at -10 with 57.5 total, whereas opposed to at 8 a.m. this morning, FanDuel had this at -14. All right, so you rarely see a 4-point opening discrepancy. Now we see it sort of lying in the middle. They both kind of met in the middle at that 12.5. You can find a 13 probably out there right now. If you go
I'm seeing a 13.5 on a couple books on betting.
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of tells you where it's at. We did very little consensus on where to go with this game. I got to say, looking at Mississippi State, even one SEC win, and even that win was a 7-3 just stinker against a Arkansas team that promptly fired Dan Enos, their offensive coordinator, mercifully, and gave the Razorback faithful back the ability to actually watch their games. So even that one win in the SEC wasn't particularly impressive. They did have the overtime victory against Arizona in week 2, but I venture to guess if those two teams played again, it would be a much different result given the way these two teams have gone direction-wise. I have a hard time backing Mississippi State. I know they're at home. I know it's the Egg Bowl and everything, and that we could throw them up. But man, this team is not giving me much to be excited about. Will Rogers is back, of course, but I just think as long as we get a healthy Jackson Dart, we get Trey Harris, you get Sean Judkins, and Jordan Watkins. There's just too many weapons for Ole Miss to deploy. I'm leaning hard on the Rebels.
And as you guys mentioned, it is weird. Of all these games, this one probably has the biggest swing of numbers because I'm seeing as low as 11 on Ole Miss at DraftKings with as high as 13.5. And as you mentioned, there was a 14.5 that was floating out there. So as we are recording this, there's around a 2 to 2.5 point discrepancy depending on the book. That is not the case with a whole lot of these games. So whichever side that you lay on, like Thor, you said, if you can get over that 13 number, the Mississippi State number is starting to look a little bit better. So very, very good, gentlemen. Let's kick it over to the next game, and we are now jumping over to Friday. We got a couple Friday games we want to pay attention to. How about Texas hosting Texas Tech? Texas now 10-1, 7-1 in the Big 12. Texas Tech is 6-5, and we've got another just under 2 touchdown differential here. Texas favored by 13.5. The total is 54.5. So Thor, again, these are, we're getting a little bit of these bigger lines, but is it justified to be under 2 touchdowns for Texas right now? You tell us and what the adjusted line is looking like.
My number on this one's Texas minus 14.6. So I'm just a little bit above the market on this one. Tech was able to, speaking of rallying into bowl season, they clinched their spot by beating UCF in the matchup of 5-5 Big 12 teams last week. So Texas Tech does punch their ticket in, has been playing a little bit better since Baron Morton came back. They had been down to their 3rd string quarterback before that. Tyler Shuck had his annual season-ending injury in September. But this is a team that runs the ball very well. So well, in fact, Taj Brooks after the game, I don't know if you guys caught this, after they beat UCF, told reporters he's probably gone after this season.
Yep.
Yeah. So he's going to declare for the draft, but obviously he's going to be playing in this one. I would expect him to opt out of the bowl game. But this coming week, it looks like it's going to be Taj Brooks' last game. This is a tough one. My system, it has a slight lean towards Texas, but if the number is 14, I don't know if I want to lay 14 with Texas. The last couple of weeks, you had the game where Ewers came back, then Brooks gets hurt. I haven't been the most impressed with Texas these last couple of weeks. Not sure if I want to lay quite that many points, but I think it's more or less a fair line.
All right, Foton, what do you think on this one? We've seen a little bit of movement on the total, very slight movement on where the numbers kind of opened up. Still, some of that opening number is still floating out there. But what's your lean on this Texas game?
Yeah, as you mentioned, this opened up at -14 on both FanDuel and Circa, down to that 13.5. But we saw the total creep up from 52.5 on both of those books. They're both uniform about the Texas Tech-Texas game, up to 54.5, as we discussed. With Texas Tech, man, it's hard for me to really feel great about taking this. I mean, they've been much more methodical in terms of their pace of play. In terms of this season, they're running the ball a lot more, even though they're ripping off a play every 25.4 seconds, 16th in the country. They are absolutely, with the run game, the constant one after another, the Taj Brooks, just sort of an onslaught that they're rolling out on teams. This is very different than the Zach Kittley we saw at Western Kentucky. But with Texas Tech, they haven't been playing inspired ball. Like, even last week, they got handled pretty easily by UCF this past weekend. Game before, as a game that Thor was obviously intimately watching, against Kansas, they beat Kansas still. I mean, they probably shouldn't have won that game. 16% post-game win expectancy. Their win against TCU, that was, again, pretty much a coin flip. They played a lot better against BYU, but dumped that game, and then they got rolled by Kansas State. It's like, it's hard to really stand behind Texas Tech the way that they've been playing. They find a way to cough up games that they should lose, that they should win, and win games they should lose. So I have a hard time backing them. I'm leaning Texas, but I think more so, I think we get a little more points, and that's why it's ticking up. I kind of like the total on this game over. Okay,
so let me ask you guys something really important with this. We have Thanksgiving and we have Black Friday. We've got lines that are looking the same. If you have to pick a Black Friday game versus a Thanksgiving Day game, similar lines, does one day give you a lean? Does Thanksgiving, because we're lounging around, maybe with family, maybe avoiding whatever, or is it Black Friday because we are coming off of Thanksgiving? If you had to pick your bowl betting day, Thanksgiving or Friday, Thor, which one, Black Friday or Thanksgiving?
Well, Black Friday, because you're gonna have more tickets. But if you don't have a ticket on the Egg Bowl, you're not a degenerate like I am.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, even the years where it's like, oh, I don't know, flip a coin, you got to have a bet on that one. But the Black Friday, I always love it because it's like, it's like your appetizer to the last Saturday of the regular season. I always like it at the end where we get to split those over 2 days because you get to watch more football. Right? Like, we get all the different time slots on the Friday. We can do our screens across. We can do the same thing on Saturday. So, but definitely Black Friday for me.
Okay. So, Foton, are you going to agree with that one? We do have more tickets on Friday, but the degenerate side does live on Thanksgiving. What's your lean?
Yeah, we for Thanksgiving, I have to sit there and watch all these NFL games that I just don't care about the same way up until the Egg Bowl comes. So it's like an oasis in a desert of NFL boredom for me. So I have this special place in my heart for the Egg Bowl. But as Thor mentioned, like that Black Friday slate, it's like it's the last week of the season. So they make sure to just flood us with games. You get the...
It's like 11.
Oh, it's awesome. You get another, like 10 to 12 games, depending on the year, on Black Friday. And then, you have a nice solid slate on Saturday that you can only watch so many games as they're happening anyways. It just gives us the ability to watch more. And as Thor said, bet on more.
I guess that's the hyper. Did you guys see, again, not to really derail us, but did you see Bakhtiari calling college football the inferior sport? It's saying he hates to watch college football. I don't know if you guys saw that. The former or still current Packers offensive lineman was just trashing college football on the eve of Thanksgiving and Black Friday and bowls. What are we doing? What are we doing, guys? I don't know.
Packers, all right, Thor? Packers.
Yeah, that's a Packer thing. Maybe he's gotten hit in the head too many times, but yeah, I mean, high school players are not as good as college players. The sky will, the sun will rise tomorrow and the sky is blue. Like, thanks, David.
Thank you. Yeah,
Appreciate your thoughts
Thank
on
you
the
very
subject.
much.
Yeah.
All right, let's stick on Friday. This is the last Friday one we're going to talk about. Then we're going to move to Saturday, big Saturday game that's going to kick us off here. We've got Oregon State, 8-3. Oregon State is 5-3 in the Pac-12, going up against Oregon, 10-1, 7-1 in the Pac-12. And they are under a 2-touchdown favorite. Biggest total line so far that we've talked about, 62.5. So Thor, again, we've talked about a lot of big lines. These are some big early games that are non-Saturday here. Is Oregon at 13.5 something that you want to tackle, or maybe it's going to be on the other side?
Yeah, so it looks like this one's ticked down from the 2 touchdowns, like you mentioned. And my line on this one is Oregon minus 12.3. So showing just a bit of line value on Oregon State. The thing with Oregon State, though, is you got to pick yourself up off the mat after what happened on Saturday night. An 8-2 team. They obviously wanted to knock off Washington and their dream season, and they just couldn't quite get it done. There was the weird thing on the last drive. It's like, okay, now they're going to win the game. And they were sort of meandering and going slow. It's like that Donovan McNabb Super Bowl drive way back in the day. It's like, come on, pick up the pace a little bit. And so they've suffered their third loss now, not as much to play for. Now you have to go on the road, play your big rival. Oregon State has not been as good on the road. They're the team who's the best against the spread team at home in college football over the last 5 years. Not nearly as good on the road. Tough proposition. So I think that's why we're getting a little bit of a tax baked in here. My system prefers the over in this one. Right now, 62.5 live, it looks like. My system's a little bit over 65 in terms of the total. Oregon very clearly wants Bo Nix to win the Heisman. And that's not like a cliche or whatever. That's something where in this game, I think you're going to see it manifest, where they're going to keep trying to put points on the board, keep giving Bo Nix touchdowns. Oregon State obviously needs to return fire. I think they'll pick up the pace just a little bit here, knowing what this is going to be heading into the game. So my lean early would be over.
Now, Foton, you love your totals. We've seen some movement on the total. That might be something that's in play. I also want to point out on that spread, I'm only seeing one book at 13.5, but I am giving you the best line. A lot of them are at the 2-touchdown marker. And, if the trends keep going, that might tick up outside of 2 touchdowns. But we have seen some pretty significant movement on the totals. So, Foton, where's your lean? Do you like that total? What do you got on Oregon State?
Yeah, both Vegas and the domestics listed the total at 58.5. That has now gone up to 62.5 in a lot of places. I mean, that's pretty sizable jump just in the few hours that we have today. When it comes to Oregon State, if you notice, they have 3 losses this year, but each one of these losses has been very closely contested. Obviously, the game this weekend, 22-20 against Washington, but Arizona was a 27-24. That came right down to the wire. Washington State, they dumped one early in September in that game, 38-35. So they kept pace with them in that particular game. I think Oregon will score, but I mean, Oregon State has proven to be year in and year out, well coached, a ground-based attack. Damian Martinez is going to get his time. You got DJU, a battle-tested veteran there under center. I lean Oregon State, and I would wait to see, like you said, it's been ticking up from the 13 open on Circa. Now you're getting it at 14. If I can get that at 14.5, I think I'd like to take the Beavers, and I agree with Thor on that over lean.
All right.
Well, could I just pause the show for 1 second? I seen the sheet. I saw that you were just going to skip over Iowa against Nebraska on Black Friday.
I know. You know what? I realize that. It's a drastic mistake. Yeah, we don't have the line stuff up here, but go.
And we're live this week, Welsh.
Please.
Okay.
Please.
You're talking about the Big West champion here. We have to have proper respect. Obviously, that's why I'm dressed to impress today. The point I want to make about that one, the opening total of that game that Vegas has dropped. Vegas is sick and tired of us every single week cashing tickets on the Iowa under. This time they've gotten more aggressive with us. The total of this game is 27.5, which would shatter the record for lowest point total in college football history, of which the 5 top games on the list are Iowa games since November. I think with one Service Academy game that's like tied for the 5th place game in there. The funny thing is my system, so 27.5 is what it is live. My system spit out a total on that game of 25 flat, suggesting there is still value on the under. And Iowa does not go over. So I just figured I would toss it out. And by the way, Nebraska is now starting Chuba Purdy, the brother of Brock Purdy. Chuba, who is now for 3-4 years been wandering the college football desert trying to find a starting job. He finally got thrust into a starting role last week. Nebraska down to their third string quarterback. This one is going to be an ugly, ugly, ugly game. We're going under.
And got the shirt. I'm Fantasy Pros, your Iowa. There you go. Bad mistake on my end. I completely agree here. But now let's go over to Saturday. This will make everybody happy. Maybe this is the game of the year. Ohio State versus Michigan. Couple undefeateds. The line, 3.5 on Michigan right now. Total is 56.5. Thor, what are we doing? Where are your bets being placed? Is there something we need to wait on? Talk to us about Michigan and Ohio State.
I'm going to be on Michigan in this game. Michigan was my preseason national title winner. I have not changed that pick, and we're not going to, obviously, for this one. I like Michigan as a team quite a bit more. I also don't think that Jim Harbaugh being not there, I don't think that matters at all. He is allowed to be the head coach of that team basically at all times outside of just the game window. So basically when the bus leaves the team hotel, that's when he stops being the head coach. And then when it returns, then he starts being the head coach again. It's just during the game time. He's still actively a part of running the practices, the game plan, everything like that. And he's traveling to the games. Last week he was in Maryland. It's just he didn't go to the stadium. Who knows? Maybe watch it out of Fuddruckers or something like that. But, I'm showing, again, line value on Michigan. That thing, my system being almost at -6 in that one. Like their defense a whole heck of a lot more. I think they can impose their will by running the ball here. Ohio State, they have been able to run the ball a little bit better in recent weeks. They got Travion Henderson back. He went off for like 175 yards last week, but now he's got to get confronted with that Michigan front seven. I think that could be an issue for him. It's Michigan for me in this game.
Man, the Fuddruckers, that opens up a whole new world of my brain as a kid. And my most crucial, rhetorical mistake as a child was trying to express that I wanted to go to Fuddruckers, but it didn't come out quite right. So good blast from the past. So Foton, what do you got? Same game, Michigan, Ohio State. This is going to be the game to watch. Where is it the game to bet?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. In the lead up, the early pre-Saturday betting window, this was a 6-point favorite of Michigan. That since opened at -5 on Circa and is now obviously down to that 3.5 mark. So the value was, if you wanted Ohio State, you should have taken them last week, since, as this game gets closer, despite the fact it's Ann Arbor, this has closed the gap. I still do. I mean, I can't help it. I do lean Ohio State, taking the 3.5 points. I did get it at 6 last week. Obviously, you want every point you can get, but I have Michigan in the FSGA contest when it comes to the gambling picks, so for the national title, just like Thor. But man, I can't help but think, is it going to be different? There's 3 years in a row, Ryan Day's job rumored to be on the line if they lose. They'll be hiring a new athletic director, and his first edict will be, if he loses to Michigan, he'll allegedly be fired. There's always great scuttlebutt running around in the college football, realm, but I do lean Ohio State. The total is held steady at 46.5. I think that's a pretty good total. But respectfully, we might have to have another helmet bet. I'm on OSU.
Done. Well, hey, and just a couple comments towards why did it go from the 6, which is where my system is, to down to the 4, 3.5 that we're seeing in the market right now. Yeah, Ohio State took care of business against Minnesota. That was exactly what you wanted to see. Meanwhile, with Michigan, they were sort of playing fiddlesticks with Maryland for a long time in that game. They won by a much less of a margin. And then Michigan suffered some injuries in that game. I think that's another thing playing a part in this thing. Roman Wilson's a big one. That's Michigan's wide receiver 1. We do not have any update on his status as of yet, but he was knocked out in the first half against Maryland. So that's something that we're going to have to monitor. They also Michigan had a linebacker injury, Michael Barrett, 6-year linebacker. He got hurt. He says it's an AC sprain in his shoulder. So that's something that we're going to have to monitor there. And then the last one, Miles Hinton, the offensive tackle that Michigan was starting in place of Ladarius Henderson, the transfer kid that they had brought in to plug a hole at left tackle. Miles Hinton so Henderson was out this past week. against Maryland. Hinton was starting for him. Hinton gets injured and knocked out of the Maryland game. So then they were down to a third string tackle for a large portion of that game. We were still waiting for a status update on Hinton. Sharon Moore did say that he believes that Ladarius Henderson will be back for Ohio State. But that's something to keep an eye on, because if you're Michigan, you do not want to be starting a third string offensive tackle against Ohio State, or the shuffling that would entail. We know that Michigan's offensive line is super deep. I think Jim Nagy, the czar of the Senior Bowl, had said before the season, I think it was 7 offensive linemen from Michigan he had on the preseason Senior Bowl watch list. So we know it's deep. But Michigan's offensive line hasn't been quite as elite as we were hoping so far. Like Henderson, for instance, has played a little bit down from what the expectation was. He's not the only one, just slightly. But again, you want to be at full strength for this game. So 3 injuries to keep an eye on there.
And there still are some wavering lines as I'm looking at them over on bettingpros.com/NCAAF/odds. You can check out, and you can just go to bettingpros.com and you can click and you can kind of peruse them. And there's between 4.5s to 3.5 so the best line. But man, you look at that opening. I hate hooks. I really hate that hook if you're at 3.5 and you see that opening line of 1 and you're just like, oh man. That's why getting in as early as possible, friends. All right. LSU, speaking of adjusting lines, this one has gone bum all morning and afternoon long as we've been preparing for the show. This is LSU is hosting Texas A&M. LSU 8-3, 5-2 in the SEC. Texas A&M is 7-4, 4-3 in the SEC. We've seen 11.5. It's currently sitting at 10.5. I think there was even some lines, quite a few more points earlier that Foton will mention, and the total's at 66.5. So Thor, what's your adjusted line telling us on this LSU game, and where's your bet?
My line on this one is LSU minus 8.1, so showing a little bit of value on A&M. But to take it, you're going to have to trust their young quarterback, Jalen Henderson, who it was A&M's third string quarterback. He's been starting because, obviously Connor Weigman was knocked out for the season in September. Then Max Johnson had been in. Then Max Johnson suffers his own injury that appears like it's going to keep him out for at least, it was last week certainly, and then this coming week. So it looks like we're going to get Jalen Henderson again. Henderson against Abilene Christian this past week, 16 for 23, 260 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, ran around a little bit at 27 yards scrambling. But, that's the guy that you're going to need to return fire with LSU. A little bit precarious of an idea going on the road. However, I will say contextually, as we talk about every week with regards to LSU's defense is absolutely horrific. So Jalen Henderson, at least I watched a little bit of that game. I was like, oh, okay. This kid looks decent. Different proposition here. You're going to be in a shootout. Every LSU game is. They are the bizarro Iowa Hawkeyes. All their games go over. And by the way, my system is strongly suggesting an overplay. My number on this game is around 80, whereas in the market, we're in the mid 60s. And basically every week for LSU, my system's screaming, take the over, take the over, take the over. That's probably what we're going to be doing here again. But if that number is over 10, I think I lean towards Texas A&M.
Foton, we saw this going down into the single digits, closer to Thor's projected line when it opened up, and it's kind of moved across. We also have seen, I get it on both sides. This is actually a really funny thing, and I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but we've seen 2 different books, one adjust under and one adjust over on the total. So just there's a lot of weird line movement on this game. So what do you like? What are you thinking on the LSU matchup?
Yeah, another discrepancy between Vegas and the domestics. This opened up, 8 a.m. FanDuel had this at minus 13.5 with a 64.5 total, whereas 2 p.m. for the circa drop, Vegas had them at minus 8 with a 68.5 total. So that's a 5.5 point difference on the spread, a 4-point difference on the total. As you mentioned, we've seen that sort of meet in the middle, similar to what we saw with Ole Miss, Mississippi State, where LSU is now in that 10.5 range with 66.5. I completely agree on the over. You cannot take an under position on LSU. They rank 130th out of 133 teams in EPA per play defensively, 120th in success rate. I don't understand how this is. LSU recruits the way they do. They don't let hardly anybody get out of their state. Like, they have drawn a border wall around Louisiana, and the talent that comes out of there, it's shocking to me that their defense is this pathetic. But, here we are. I am all about the over. And as stated, even with this defense, I can't trust A&M, their offense. I didn't trust them with Max Johnson. I really liked what I saw from Wegman earlier in the season. But now with third string quarterback Henderson, I mean, I don't know what you want. How can you trust a team like that? I'm willing to lay the 10.5 points to find out.
Moving over to some of the later-ish, afternoonish games into the later night on Saturday, we've got Auburn. Auburn is hosting Alabama. 10-1 Alabama's undefeated in the SEC. Auburn 3-4 in the SEC. Alabama is over the hook, 14.5 road favorite. 48.5 is the line. So Thor, we've kind of talked about. I'm very curious because I have not looked at your system yet. We've talked about the very few times we've seen Alabama value. Is there any Alabama value right now?
I hate to say it, but the value in this game's on Auburn. And after what we saw on Saturday, it's going to take some real courage to take it. My line on this game is Alabama minus 13, and we're at 14.5 or so in the marketplace right now. So showing a little bit there. Obviously, Auburn last week was in the look-ahead spot. You still don't want to get crushed at home by New Mexico State. It was super embarrassing. But this is the game that they were looking ahead to. Can Hugh Freeze and company, will they have something ready for Alabama? We'll have to see. I will say contextually, Hugh Freeze has been very good in his career as an underdog and as a double-digit underdog. He gets this one at home. We have seen wonky things happen in the Iron Bowl, year after year after year, whatever. So this could be a decent spot for Auburn. I think if I can get that line over 14, I'm going to hold my nose and take it with the home team.
Foton, $1.8 million to take plus 14.5 Auburn. Are you good to go? Do you have the cojones to go Auburn in any way against this Alabama team?
Well, I mean, I'm surprised to hear that Thor wouldn't take him because let's be honest, Thor and Hugh Freeze everybody knows what good friends those two are. I mean, Hugh Freeze and Thor, like that, the two of them. That being said, with Auburn, man, it's coming off the Jerry Kill loss, and so much respect for Jerry Kill. What a great coach. He deserves better than to be at New Mexico State, and I hope he does get another Power 5 job. But even their wins in the SEC play just weren't very inspiring. They beat the dregs of the West: Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State. That's it. That's the list of SEC teams they've beat. They got rolled by Ole Miss, LSU, Georgia, A&M, and now obviously New Mexico State. It's like when they are the classic Auburn. They beat who they're supposed to beat, and they lose who they're supposed to lose to. If there's anything, I do not have the cojones to take Auburn. I'm sorry. I just can't do it. I've seen too much. Alabama wants this. They're going to roll into they want to have a good showing heading into the SEC championship game against Georgia. I just can't take Auburn. I can't.
It doesn't seem like this line is going to move back in any favor either. I see some 15s that are floating out there, and probably going to creep. It's probably going to continue to creep, especially after that. So, I mean, if you're an Auburn play, you might want to be on the lookout for an even better line throughout the week. If you're an Alabama play, it's probably not going to get much better than this, unfortunately. Iowa State, who's 6-5, 5-3 in the Big 12, going up against Kansas State, 8-3, 6-2 in the Big 12. KSU is a 11.5 point favorite. Thor, what does the Thor adjusted line system tell us about this bad boy?
I got Kansas State minus 10.1 in this game. So system showing a little bit of value on Iowa State. I prefer Iowa State in this game as well. I think they match up decently well here in that Iowa State's defensive strength, it's their front seven. They're solid against the run. So they're going to force you to pass. Texas in that last game where they won on Saturday night in Ames by 10 points. Quinn Ewers wasn't great in that game, but he was good enough, right? Like Texas at least has the ability to divert to their passing game. They were able to do that a little bit. I don't know if Kansas State does as much. Heck, even Kansas's crappy defense, like I'm sorry for my alma mater, but their defense is not very good. They were holding down Kansas State's offense for large swaths of that game where Kansas almost upset Kansas State with their third string freshman walk-on quarterback, who is the son of the Colts general manager, Cole Ballard was this kid's name. And Kansas probably should have won that game, just like Kansas probably should have beaten Texas Tech when Jason Bean got knocked out the first time we saw this third string walk on. So I wasn't super duper impressed with Kansas State in that game. They didn't get Phillip Brooks involved. For instance, Kansas was loading up a little bit against the run. Iowa State is certainly going to be able to slow down that Kansas State rushing attack. Getting double digits with them in a game where you would expect it to be a bit lower scoring physical game, that's what I would take with the underdog here.
Real quick, I want to ask you, do you think this is going to be worthwhile waiting to see if this line goes back in favor? Or like, which direction do you think it's going to go? Because I do see, we don't have actually as many books on this one, but I do see a 12. We've got the 11.5 on DK. 12 is on Caesar. Caesar sometimes does something a little different. Which direction do you think this is going to go if you wait?
I think you could take it now, because I would be stunned if this thing got to 13. I would just be really surprised if the market pushed it there. And that's the next key number. I think it's more likely that as the week goes on, this thing gets closer to my number, whether it closes at 10.5, maybe at 10. We are kind of in a dead zone right now. So it's not imperative like right this second. But, you know, when you start seeing the tide move in that direction, it gets to 11, 10.5, like that would be the pull the trigger point, I think, on Iowa City or on Iowa State. I'm sorry.
And Foton, we saw like exactly what I was just talking about, like that line that we'd love to have. That's where it opened, and then it's crossed over multiple points here. So I guess the same question kind of still aligns. Like, you know, do you think this could go in another direction? But what bet do you like out of this one?
Yeah, in terms of the open, I mean, this has had some pretty significant movement. We saw FanDuel opened up at -14, you know, right on that 2 touchdown mark, and then Circa at 2 p.m. opens up at -15. So, I mean, pretty substantial going from that 15 down to 11.5. I don't think we're going to see it pop back up. You know, maybe you can find some 12.5s, but I don't think we're going to see it get back up there in that 13.5. And I think the reason Thor pretty succinctly put it, Iowa State is a defense-oriented team that plays slow, wants to limit possessions, you know, 106th in pace, but isn't a particularly good running team. In fact, they're a pretty bad running team, you know, 124th in terms of overall offensive success rate, but 114th in terms of rushing performance on the offensive side. But that being said, they play close games. That's what they want to do. It's like they're geared to do this. So, you know, you look at, you know, their previous losses. Okay, Texas, 10-point game. You know, they were in it. They were competitive. As I mentioned with Thor, Kansas, 7-point game. Ohio, they lost, you know, early in the season. It's a 3-pointer, 7-pointer Iowa. The only game they've really been handled is Oklahoma, but that was still back in late September. This is a team that is certainly turning around and has been more competitive. I lean towards the Iowa State side here.
All right, final one on the main slate that we're going to talk about. We've got North Carolina going up against NC State. North Carolina's 8-3. They're 4-3 in the ACC, though. NC State 8-3. 5-2 in the ACC. North Carolina, though, is a 2-point road favorite. Total is 56.5. Thor, break this one down for us. Is there a bet we want to tackle on this late Saturday game?
Well, it's really, you know, we came into this season in the summer. We were just talking about Caleb Williams, talking about Drake May. It's really disappointing what happened to those two guys in their final season. They were not helped by their supporting cast, obviously. Caleb Williams finished at 7-5. We have seen him for the last time in a college uniform because USC cleverly scheduled themselves a bye in week 13, thinking that, well, we'll get a bye before the Pac-12 title game, and then we're going to win that. Then we're going to go into the college football playoff. That's why they played in week 0, but they finished 7-5. So it just gives more people time to declare. In this one, North Carolina, they've been in the tank now for a month. I was on them against Clemson, and as Foton mentioned, it's not just that they probably should have covered that game. They maybe should have won that game. One of the fumbles that Foton was mentioning inside the 10-yard line, I think Foton mentioned that they had 2 of them.
Yeah,
it was actually that one was inside the 10-inch line. O'Marion Hampton was on a breakaway to the end zone, and then Nate Wiggins put that guy in the friggin' Olympics.
Yes.
He came like a bat out of hell from who knows where. He was running by his teammates. You know, it's like Usain Bolt, like we'll give the high school sprinters, we'll let them, you know, have a 2-minute head start. And then Usain Bolt just comes up behind them all and just runs by him, catches up to Hampton inside the 1-yard line, swats the ball out. It was like Don Beebe with Leon Lett or whatever. So, I mean, there was different stuff like that going on, but North Carolina, once again, is going to have to pick themselves up off the mat after a game where qualitatively, just performance-wise, probably should have won, or it should have been very close there at the end. And because of that stuff, it wasn't. My line in this game is North Carolina -1.5. They're traveling now to their hated rival. Again, you have to pick yourself up off the mat. North Carolina has been playing down. NC State is the opposite.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys. I can't figure out why this team is good. I've watched NC State plenty this year. Every time I watch them, I'm like, that team stinks. And then a couple of weeks ago, MJ Morris, the quarterback that they had hand selected to go forward with, now he's out for the year. So then they were forced to go back to Brennan Armstrong. And they're still continuing to pull these games out of their butt. Week after week, it's all these close wins, and they just figure it out how to win it at the end. Because of all that stuff, maybe you'd lean towards NC State. North Carolina is certainly the more talented team. I think that's why Vegas dropped this thing 2.5, and they're like, market, you figure this thing out.
Foton, you figure it out for us then. That's what you have to do. 2.5, 2, that's around the line. 2 is the best number I see. There are some 2.5s out there. A little bit of line movement here. So your job now, Foton, give us the bet.
Oh, great. That's my job. With UNC, yeah, this actually opened at -1. So you're seeing the market side with North Carolina. And as mentioned, I was at the Clemson, North Carolina game. The Omarion Hampton fumble on the 1-inch line was amazing. It was an absolutely amazing play. Cannot be understated. You should watch the Nate Wiggins hustle on that.
He's going to run a 4.2 at the combine.
Dude, how can he not?
World
I can't
class
wait for that prop to come out. Me and Thor are going to be sitting there. We're going to be smashing that button on the under.
We're going to be counting our money on that one. Oh, yeah. They can't set that one low enough.
Nobody loves the draft prop market like Thor and I do. Like
nobody.
It's a yearly fetish for us. So get ready for that. Hopefully they'll let us do a show on that again.
Oh, please. Yeah, please.
But with North Carolina, I thought they played better. You know, I thought they deserved to be in it right until the end. They had a lot of things that had to go wrong in that particular game. And, you know, they're playing in Death Valley too with Clemson. But then on the other side, like you're saying, North Carolina State, I am befuddled how this is a 8-3 team, 5-2 in the ACC, is on a 4-game win streak with 2 different quarterbacks coming in. Brennan Arm week is what I like to call him. For Virginia, you know, he's a different guy than we saw under Robert and I the first go around, you know, 2 years ago when they were at Virginia. You know, he took a circuitous route over here to NC State, but now he's running the ball more. It's like they're not even bothering with the pass. They've gone from, you know, a team that finished in the top 10 of pass attempts 4 straight years under an eye to a team where you have Armstrong running for 96 and 89 yards each of the past 2 games against Wake and a pretty damn good Virginia Tech defense coached by Brent Pry. You know, if they can do anything, they're generally pretty good at playing D. But man, they beat Clemson. They beat Miami on this 4-game win streak. Took Louisville 13-10 to the limit. I mean, what more do you want? This team is, I mean, classic Dave Doran, just a scrappy, gritty team. But you know, as much as I respect NC State, I got to think that the talent level that NC is rolling out, and you know, I think they kind of lined this a little low based off that Clemson loss, which I thought could have gone either way. I'm leaning North Carolina.
There you go. There's your bets. Those are big slate games, though. Thor's system spits out all this magnificent stuff. Thor, is there a game or two that you just wanted to highlight? I know there was one, I think, on the Thursday or the Friday slate. We got some early game action. Just throw to you if there's a game or two that your system spit out that you want people to know about as far as early lines go.
There is, but before I get to that, I want to do a brief spin through the news and some ramifications on the lines that those could be with ones we didn't hit. Mentioned before, Dino Babers is getting fired. 2nd straight year where Syracuse has gone into the tank at the end. Syracuse is hosting Wake Forest, another team that having a very disappointing year. My line's 2.5. Vegas has it at 2.5 right now too. So I'm right there on it. But something to keep an eye on in addition in that game is Syracuse was not only out their top 2 quarterbacks. Garrett Schrader once again was out. He had come back for one game and then they withheld him again. Syracuse had to start a tight end at quarterback in that game and just run wildcat in their last loss. If they have to do that again against Wake Forest, I think there's probably some value on Wake Forest, even it being the last Dino Babers game, even it being a potential for Syracuse to get into bowl season because they're 5-6 right now. Wake Forest's season is done, but Dave Clawson's a very good coach, so I thought I would mention that one. And then a couple injury ones. I forgot to mention during the Egg Bowl breakdown, both of Ole Miss's starting tackles missed the last game. One of them, Lane Kiffin, said after the game that Jaden Williams, he thinks he's going to be back this coming week for Thursday. Keep in mind, very quick turnaround though. And Kiffin even saying that and keeping out the other kid's name would seem to suggest that the other kid for sure is out. So they're hoping to get one of them back. We'll see on that. If they're out both their tackles again against Mississippi State, that could be a data point for Mississippi State. Graham Mertz is out for the year. He broke his collarbone. He had a collarbone fracture in that game. Max Brown came in at the very end. Their backup quarterback sets up an interesting Florida State game because, of course, the biggest injury news of the week was Jordan Travis. The replay that ESPN wouldn't show, justifiably so, very devastating ankle injury that he had. So Florida State is going to have Tate Rodemaker. Florida's going to be starting this Max Brown kid. So it's sort of the throw your hands up game because we haven't seen these guys very much. My line on that game is Florida State -8 traveling to Florida. Vegas right now has it at 6.5. But again, you have to sort of do the math with the backup quarterbacks in your head. Wouldn't argue with someone that wanted to place a bet on Florida on that. I'm probably going to wait a couple days, see what the market does with the line. Something to keep an eye on there. Another one, a couple other quarterback ones. Drew Allar was knocked out of their game, Penn State's win over Rutgers on Saturday. Was seen flexing his right arm and shoulder on the sideline, did not return to the game. We did not get a good update on him afterwards. Something to keep an eye on with regards to his status if you're considering Penn State this week. Another one, Dylan Gabriel suffered a head injury in Oklahoma's narrow win over BYU, surprisingly narrow win, in part because they had to play the second half with Jackson Arnold. So keep an eye on Dylan Gabriel's status. Still have Grayson McCall out, still have Riley Leonard out, different stuff like that. Fresno State, they had to start their backup quarterback again because Mikey Keene had the concussion-like symptoms. One other one, Shadir Sanders was knocked out of Colorado's game against Wazoo early, and then without Shadir Sanders, Colorado doesn't really have a team. That's one to keep an eye on in advance of this Utah game. I think if Shadir Sanders plays in that game, and he's reasonably, even 90% Shadir Sanders, I actually think there could be some value on Colorado. The line right now is -22, Utah -22 at home. My line on that game is Utah -18. Colorado, the thing they do, it's hitting you in the short intermediate sectors with their passing game, the quick hitting stuff. That is Utah's biggest defensive weakness, is defending that. Utah's good against the run, and they're good defending the deep passing. But what Colorado does on offense, with Shadir Sanders, if the third string kid's in, you want no part of Colorado.
They're
helpless. They're going to get blasted in this game because he can't run the offense that they have, whatever. But if Shadir is playing with those 3-4 good receivers that they have, that's a potential for them to stay within that number. So thought I'd test that stuff out.
And there's also that injury was a touchdown's worth of line movement because that opened up that Colorado game opened up at 15 and it's down to 22.5 right now. So it's baked in right now that Shadir potentially misses the game. So to your point, if you monitor it really quick, maybe you're a fast actor and you can get in on that 22.5. If Shadir was able to get back, there might be some good value there. So last thing, Thor, were there any other games? I know we were talking about, I don't remember if it was a Buffalo or Toledo game. Were there a couple system plays that jumped out to you that you wanted to target, or did we cover them with the injuries?
One of mine for early in the week, because we won't be back before this to talk to folks. I'm interested in Eastern Michigan. It looks like I'm very surprised by this. Are you guys seeing Buffalo laying 6.5? Right now against Eastern Michigan on Tuesday. On Tuesday.
Yeah, I was seeing 6 right before you.
Yeah, that line is too high. My system's line on that game is Buffalo -1.9. The other, so Buffalo, the early success they had, they ran into a couple good circumstances in terms of playing backup quarterback, stuff like that. Buffalo stinks. Eastern Michigan is not good either. They've scratched and clawed their way to 5-6 to put themselves on the precipice of potentially fluking their way or rallying their way in, however you want to say it, into bowl season. Eastern Michigan actually has something to play for here. Eastern Michigan has the enormous coaching advantage, and both the teams stink. So, if you're going to give me 6.5 points with the team that has something to play for against this incompetent Buffalo team, I'm absolutely taking that. I think there's a lot of value on Eastern Michigan that early week game.
Yeah, and there's 6 and 6.5s out there if you guys want to take advantage of it. As far as the show schedule goes, I do not believe Thor is on the midweek show, but we got Bogman and Mike Farrell. I could be speaking incorrect, but I believe that's the case. We've got the midweek show previewing some of the games. We've got the Saturday
I'll be on this week.
Oh, you are on that
I'm
one.
on
Okay,
this
so
week, yeah.
sorry, I wasn't trying to fire you. I was trying to get you out of here. Yeah, Thor, I'm like kicking Thor off the show. I'm like, you're out of here. Good. All right, but we've got the midweek show, Mike Farrell, Thor Nystrom. Make sure you're tuning into that, youtube.com/bettingpros, and you check out the podcast. The live streams on Saturdays have been unreal all season long. So just really, if you're, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, you're getting taken care of. As well, if you've downloaded the Betting Pros app, you can follow Thor on there. You can track all of his bets. You can tail him. You can see where he's at. You can do it with all the Fantasy Pros personalities. Plus, people that are hot, you'll get notifications on some of the people that are absolutely scorching hot. And if you want to follow them, you can set up custom notifications. It's an incredibly robust. I could sell you on it all day long. Download it for yourself. Check it out. It's completely robust. Even if it is just simple as just peeking around at the lines and you don't want to take advantage of all the features, you could do that. But you can set up a profile, track how you bet. Even if you're not putting real cash on it, you can see how you are for future betting. Download it today. Betting Pros app, iOS or Android. That is it for us. I'm Chris Welsh. You can find me on Twitter at @IsItTheWelsh, Thor Nystrom, Thor KU, and Eric Foton, CF Foton. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. It's the early line look for week 13, the end of the regular season. It's been great talking to you guys, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Betting Pros. Bye, friends.